Welcome to the Packfiller Interviews. I'm Pat Bulger. Well, you might be in the midst of the Tour de France Femmes, or you might be just in plain old tour withdrawals. Either way, you need to know there's plenty to look forward to. Heck, in case you didn't know, the World starts in just a few days. I know it's early this year, and this year's Vuelta looks like, well, at least on paper, to be potentially more explosive than any of the Grand Tour this year. So with this in mind, we have a great interview on tap today. Our guest has not only ridden the Vuelta, but he's won a stage. Wait, nope, he's won 2 stages. Wait, nope, he won 2 stages in the same year. He also had many other additions to his palmares, as well as being a thoughtful, introspective guy who's really easy to talk to. And I had a good time recording this interview. So let's see what's up with Ben King on the Packfiller Interviews. All right, today's guest has a career that consists of 8 Grand Tours, a stage win in the Criterium International, 4 national championships, and 2 wins in the 2018 Vuelta, among many others over his 15 years in the Pro Peloton. Let's welcome to the show, Ben King. How are you, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Hey, although it's incredibly formulaic and, it's the classic story structure, I like to begin most interviews with a little perspective and try to get an idea of where cycling came into your life. So if you had an origin story, if Ben King had a movie that was being made about his origin, what would that origin story be, and where would the first couple scenes of that movie take place?
The first scene was probably my friend's dad pulling me out of the bushes on my first mountain bike ride ever. We did a ride for his 13th birthday. I was 12 years old. Had never been for, I could ride a bike, but had never been for a mountain bike ride. And, every time he dragged me out of the bushes, I popped out of the other end of the trail looking like the Loch Ness Monster. And, but I just had a huge smile on my face, I remember, and I loved every minute of it. Knew that I had found a new passion, a new hobby and interest. And my dad used to race competitively. He was actually teammates with Nate Brown's dad.
Okay.
And John Kelly, who's Kelly Benefit Strategies, which is one of the partners of Human Powered Health Team. So a lot of history there that kind of relates to and follows through into my career. The point of that being that he knew what he was doing. But he quit racing when I was 3 years old.
Oh, wow.
When I showed some interest in it, he started riding again, and started taking me out on group rides, road rides, and recognized potential in me. So he started coaching me and, getting me exposure to every opportunity, driving around the state and eventually the East Coast, and then even flying me out to the national championships in Park City, Utah, where they were when I was 16.
So this was a lot of now. Sorry, I'm stammering here a little bit. Just when would you say bike racing was officially a part of your life? I mean, was it that 12-year-old mountain bike ride, or was racing really something that kicked in a little bit later, probably 16, 17?
Probably that year when I was 16, my dad told me that if I followed a structured training program and put the work in, that he would take me to the national championships. Wow. So I had a big goal in sight and locked onto that, and I didn't take a day off. I followed the training that he gave me, and so that was the first year that it felt like I was doing it, participating in it as a sport and not just a hobby.
Yeah. And your amateur career seems, at least on paper, to have been pretty short. It's been a pretty quick rise from that start into, taking this to the point where it's something that you could do for a living. What it is about cycling that seemed to click for you, especially here in the States, where we see the U.S. demographic being, honestly, primarily kind of a crit scene and things like that. Here you are as a kind of a climbing specialist.
Yeah, I think just my physiology I'm kind of built just to be a grinder, and I loved the freedom of hitting off into the mountains and spending all day just exploring, um, pushing myself, seeing if I could keep a new highest average speed or break my times up the local climbs. And so I was always pushing myself. I think that sort of just built my engine
Yeah.
to where it was competitive in um, longer road races and stage races, and not necessarily an engine for the U.S. crit scene.
Yeah. Yeah.
But back then, there were more road racing opportunities.
Th-
Um, even 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, there were lots of big professional stage races in the U.S. um, and plenty of amateur road races, even stage races that we could travel to on the weekends.
if we could only trace back and figure out what happened, other than maybe the litigious nature of our country and running out of roads and opportunities in which to do so.
Both factors for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So your dad was the instrumental person in that. Was there somebody who kind of took you under their wings and took the reins as far as proceeding into the professional ranks?
Um, I mean, definitely my dad throughout my entire career.
That's
It was
awesome.
cycling was something that always kept us close, even if we were separated by oceans. It was and is something that continues to be a bond between us. But when I was 17, I joined the Hot Tubes development program.
Yeah,
So Toby Stanton got me my first uh, European racing experience. Every team that I rode for, there are too many people to list. It was always important to, I guess, the relationships were always what are still the most valuable thing that I take away from my career. But were also the things that helped me be successful during my career.
yeah,
Um, so every team that I rode for, I made good connections, learned what I could from people with more experience than I had, um, and continue to stay in touch with those people.
yeah. Is of all the teams you rode for and the teams that you were a part of, which one seemed to be the best fit throughout your career? This one where you're going, okay, this is a magic time. This is a great place. Everybody who I'm involved with seems to be just clicking perfectly.
Um, I always had individuals that I clicked with on every team that I rode for. Every season was a journey,
Yeah,
um, with ups and downs. And so I don't think, I can't say that one was better or worse than another. Each one shaped me as an athlete and also as a human. Um, Sometimes, you'd go through a period where the team was sort of dysfunctional, and then
sure.
um, you'd kind of have to hit reset, the team would go through a merger at the beginning of the season, and it's like, all right, you had been riding for this team that was finally starting to click and get some momentum, and then all of a sudden a sponsor pulls out, we merge with another team, and
Yeah,
then 50% of the team is new, and then it's like starting from scratch again. So with every new team, there was a rebuilding process. Um, that was sort of a trend that I felt during my career, was that in general things kind of would start slow, and we would just have to stay positive, stay focused, and keep putting in 100% into our training and races. And eventually, when things would start to click, um, that momentum would continue.
yeah. I've been at this for a long time, to be honest. And, if I go a little too far back, please forgive me. But I can remember the time where 7-Eleven entered the professional peloton, and the quote American team was something that had just, kind of changed the dynamic of the sport. You rode for multiple American-based teams, Dimension Data being one that was not based in the States. Was there a different feeling between those two makeups, or was it just because the sport has become so multicultural, multinational that there was really just no type of a switch there?
Yeah, I would say really no type of a
Really?
switch. Even the teams that were quote unquote based in America were really only registered in America.
Sure.
We might have a training camp in the United States, but that was about the only thing that made it American. You know, the on the world tour teams, the most U.S. riders I think I ever had on a team was like 5 or 6 out of 28, 30.
Yeah.
So it's just an extremely international sport. I'd still love to see at some point truly American world tour team. But it's really difficult. That was always sort of the mission of human powered health, was to bring an American team to the Tour de France one day, into the world tour. But given the lack of opportunities for U.S. racers, competing with budgets much larger than yours for the best American talent. For example, if just being American all of a sudden makes you more valuable, or that you have more negotiating power, but being American, then you sort of put yourself out of the game just on a price standpoint. So I think it would have to be something that the riders bought into, in terms of creating something new. But it's just so tough because our careers are limited, and you got to make hay while the sun shines.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of taking a little switch here, the demands. Matty Mahoric in the Tour gave a really powerful interview about the demands of being a pro, about the demands of a pro cycling career. He talked about the demands on family, the physical and mental and such. Take us inside what that kind of requirement, what that lifestyle is like, trying to constantly live that life and stay focused on a specific objective with all the irregularities and the unsure future about everything from year to year. I mean, the job security of a pro cyclist has got to be a constant stress too. When you got maybe a 2-year contract, and that if something goes wrong, you're all of a sudden scrambling.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of seasons for plenty of riders that, they do everything right and still end up at the end of a season without a contract. God. For one reason or another, the team folds and every other team is full. So all of those reasons that you just listed are the reasons that I decided to transition, on my own terms. While I'm still young enough to have a different successful career. And before I'm burned out and hate the sport. I still love it. I'm still, just grateful for everything that I got to experience through it. I achieved way more in the sport than I ever would have dreamed possible when I was just getting started out. And so, yeah, and now with a young family, it was just the right time for me to make that decision.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the demands of the career are one thing. The demands of riding a Grand Tour. You started 8 Grand Tours in your career. That is unimaginable type of a physical demand upon you. What was... And also, I'd actually like to ask, was there ever a moment where you found yourself at any of these large races going, oh my gosh, I am at the Tour of Spain. I am at the Tour de France. I am here. This is something I never would have imagined. Was it a step-by-step process where you're slowly growing into it? Was there any type of a eye-opening moment where you just looked around and didn't realize where you had been?
Yeah, and that's something I tried to hold on to. I never wanted to lose that sense of excitement, enthusiasm. No matter how many big races I did, I always tried to appreciate what it would have been like to 17, 18-year-old me, to imagine, to see myself in that position. So yeah, I mean, they are incredibly demanding. There were so many days in the Grand Tours when, 2 weeks into a Grand Tour, and these are the things that you don't see on TV, or that you don't get reported in the media, but all of a sudden you wake up and you've got a cough and, a low grade fever, and
Yeah.
you just feel miserable, some kind of infection brewing, in your lungs. And you've just been racing 2 weeks, in all conditions. And you've got a 230K stage in the Italian Alps, and it's raining. Like, and you just don't even know how you're going to get out of bed and walk down to breakfast, let alone, put on your chamois cream and saddle up in 3 hours and somehow get through that. And, it's one of the things that, a lesson, I guess, from my careers, how much we're actually capable of, and that just getting started is often the hardest part. Although the Alps were still hard.
You,
But you just, it was impossible to imagine even being physically capable of completing those things, and then somehow you just do it.
yeah. I mean,
So you kind of just have to turn your brain off. So many times in the sport, you just like, it's so futile to ask how or if. You just do it.
it
You know
seems
how to do it, and if you can, you will.
we on the outside have such a rose-colored glasses image of what that lifestyle is like. We're thinking, oh gosh, everything's taken care of, all the shiny bikes, everything like that, and not considering the element of the fact that if it's crappy and rainy, we don't have to go out and ride. Or if things aren't going well, we can drop out of a race and have an ice cream and go back home and go to work on Monday. And I'm sure that once you're on the inside, it is so much more demanding on that, and the mental fortitude you have to be able to maintain to hold on, to be able to do what you guys do, has to be just absolutely astounding.
Yes. Didn't really hear a question in that, but I
No.
agree with you.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, take me into some of those high moments, predominantly, and I don't know if this would be considered what you would say one of your best years, that 2018 Vuelta with 2 stage wins. Was something just going right that year, that time? Was it just where the bike didn't even feel heavy at all and everything was floating, or was it just, did you surprise yourself?
um, I knew that it was something that I was capable of. Um, it went better than I could have planned for myself, in the Vuelta that year. But, with the numbers that I'd been hitting in training, and honestly, I feel like my breakthrough year was like 2016, and the best that I've ever been physically in my lifetime was in July of 2016.
Really?
And I had been building and working really hard to try to make the Tour de France team that year, and didn't make the cut. I didn't get selected for whatever reason that year for the Tour de France. And so I was just at home for a month without racing, just taking Stravas. And that was a great feeling. I mean, not for me, just out in the mountains by myself with this incredible amount of fitness where I felt like I could do anything that I wanted on the bike. And no one ever saw it, but Um, that's a highlight.
Yeah.
But that was where that's what I would consider my breakthrough. I always struggled with equipment changes. And even if you ride for the same team, they might get a new bike sponsor, a new saddle brand, or whatever. But I just at that point had everything dialed. And every year after that, we were switching something, switching bike sponsors, switching saddles or pedals or whatever it may be. And there was always like a big adjustment where I would finally feel like I was starting to get dialed again, like mid-season, and then have to make another change. Um, and then yeah, for 2018, things just clicked, and that's also where I realized, and it's kind of shocking that it took me this long to acknowledge it from a more of a take a more concrete view of it.
Mhm.
Um, the fact that my body just responds really well to extreme heat. Um, I've never really performed well in the cold. I always thought that I should. People always told me, you're from, the mountains of Virginia, you're a tough guy. When it's cold and raining outside, 80% of the other guys have already quit, but you're, you're strong mentally. And um, for you, it's like half the battle's already won. And that was the attitude I always took. But my body just never responded well in the cold. And, I'd finish all those races and like confused of like, well, I was super jacked up. I was really excited. I tried my absolute best, but I just wasn't working.
Mm.
But on the days when it was 100 degrees and 90% humidity,
Oh God.
um, those are the days that I just seemed to perform better. Didn't seem to.
Yeah.
I did some work with one of the trainers of Dimension Data that year, Kieran O'Grady. He's with Israel now, but we did some uh, like heat training protocols, and he actually measured my sweat rate. And so I actually finally had some concrete data to say like, okay, I am actually good at this.
Wow. That that had to have been an enjoyable test. Just seeing how much.
Yeah,
Let's
no,
just
it
see how
wasn't.
many.
And the other
Yeah.
thing is we didn't have air conditioning in our apartment in Italy that year, and it was like 40 something degrees Celsius in our apartment. So it was like I was falling asleep in a puddle of sweat every single night, taking a cold shower, and then doing my, 5 hour rides in the like peak heat of the day for those adaptations, coming home and having no reprieve, no escape from the heat
Wow.
ever. So I think it just pushed my body to make these crazy adaptations. But I carried with me into the Vuelta that year. So, the stages that I won um, they were in extreme heat after long, grueling days in the breakaway where everyone else just kind of started to come unraveled by the end of it. And um, I felt like the heat hadn't really affected me in the same way.
Most riders are more than happy to walk away with the title of a stage win of a Grand Tour. It's a career maker. You walked away with two that year. For a non-sprinter, that's obviously pretty darn special. Um,
A non-specialist of any kind, I would say, really.
yeah, exactly.
A breakaway guy, a team guy.
Yeah. Now talk to me about that first one, and then was the second one something where you were like, "Oh, I'm going again. This is in the cards," or was it, "Oh wow, I feel good again today. We have the opportunity. I can't believe," because that's kind of a lightning striking twice moment.
Um, yeah, I mean, like I said, um, I knew it was something that I was capable of, but obviously a lot has to go your way. Um, the second stage nine, the second stage, I wasn't even the one who was supposed to be in the breakaway that day, but the start was delayed a few kilometers, and so the neutral was extended. And when we started, I was the only rider in position to attack. and we knew that we needed to have someone in the breakaway. So I didn't make the first attack, but I followed the first attack just because I knew my other teammates weren't going to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one that stuck. And so there I was in the breakaway again, which was good. I wasn't going against orders. I was trying to take some pressure off of the other guys. But I ended up in the breakaway and, but with Bauke Mollema, Thomas again, Dylan Toons,
Yeah, just hacks, complete
real
hacks.
breakaway
Yeah.
specialists. So, I backed myself. I kept my eye on those other guys throughout the day. I never counted myself out, but it was one of the reasons that I tried to like anticipate the final climb and get a little head start. Which is why, yeah. So I attacked early. Thomas again is the one who started the early aggression with like 35 kilometers to go, and then yeah, the breakaway was just attacking itself from then on out. I was able to escape 10 kilometers before the final climb started, and had built a 1 minute advantage going into the climb. So it was very tactical. But all of those near misses and what ifs and close calls, over years of racing and years of racing for breakaways, they all gave me that tactical perspective, tactical awareness to sort of seize those opportunities when they presented themselves.
So the Vuelta, you started, I mean, you competed in a Giro, correct?
Yes.
And the Tour. Compare the three grand tours and what the experience is like and how they differ between all three.
Every edition is different for each race. Physically, the hardest grand tour that I did, just purely going by the numbers, was I think it was 2019 Vuelta. Was like on paper just way harder physically just to get through it than any other grand tour that I did. The tour is more intense. There's more pressure. It's more of a production around the race. There's a lot more distraction. The Giro is, it fits all of the stereotypes of Italian romance and drama, and they love the long stages, and you want it to be as epic as possible. I loved the Giro. I wish I'd been able to do more than one, but just the fact that I lived in Italy for the majority of my career made it feel almost like a home race, more so than the others, I guess.
Yeah. So did you have a preference? Was it those longer Grand Tour stage races? Was it the single day events? Was it the shorter 1 week short type of stage races? Was of all of the above, what would you have preferred to have focused upon primarily?
I preferred stage races, whether it be week-long races or Grand Tours.
Okay. Just those opportunities to kind of keep it going, that rolling chess match type of a thing, and probably the breakaway opportunities, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Depending on how the previous stages have gone, it's like like you compared it to chess, that the board changes.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot more factors to take into consideration when planning your own race.
So the sport has obviously gone through multiple changes. I mean, I don't know about you. I started following the sport pretty heavily in the 1980s, and you weren't born yet. But every generation team seems to bring a different approach to the style of racing, and one would almost say that we're in a type of a youthful, enthusiastic style of racing that we're seeing in pro cycling. What are your thoughts on the current generation of cycling and how the sport has changed since your time in the peloton?
Um, Obviously, the sport has not changed as much in my lifetime as it did in yours, but I still think, when I got started, the power meters weren't a thing.
Yeah.
And just thinking about the way that has changed the game, um, from a sports science perspective, um, training and influencing tactics and all of the above. Um, it's kind of hard to wrap my mind around that sometimes. But it brought on this huge evolution. Obviously, also at the beginning of my career, there was sort of the big, all of the big doping fallout, all of the scandals
Yeah.
before my time, um, affected the beginning of my career. Um, Riders, I think, were all of a sudden afraid to cheat because there was more effective testing introduced.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think my generation also felt a moral obligation to change the image of the sport. I mean, I know that I did. Um, if cycling was going to be saved, it was up to us to represent it in a way that people would trust and respect. Um, Things slowed down in the beginning of my career. It was slower in 2012, 2013, 14. Around 2015 is where I would say, like, all of a sudden there was this shift where things just sort of started getting faster and faster on an annual basis. Um,
And
in terms of like what you said, we call this generation like youthful enthusiasm. I think a lot of that has to do as well with like talent scouting. When I joined the World Tour with Radio Shack, I was, the Neopro's duty was to be a domestique, to ride the front, no
yeah.
matter what. And I didn't have the engine to go for myself. I know that. Um, but it wouldn't have mattered who I was. I was a Neopro. My job was to support the guys who had finished on the podium in Grand Tours. They had earned that place. No Neopro was going to get those opportunities, no matter what. Um, but now, because teams can look at the numbers of the old guard and look at the numbers of some kid who submits his like Strava
Yeah.
files and Zwift data, they can say, "Wow, this kid actually has potential to be even better. We should give him chances." So you could take a kid from California that's never raced before but has this huge engine, and he could get a World Tour contract. Like, that's actually happening. And not only is he getting a contract, he's getting opportunities. And then you have, the Remcos and
Yeah.
Tadejs and Vingagos, and I mean, you name it. There's so many right now that are just freakishly talented. Um, but we can ID them now. They don't have to necessarily come through the ranks, the way that I feel like my generation had to a little bit more.
And the tactical mind of it also seems to be something, I guess now because race directors can be in your ear the entire time, that tactical game is something that can be taught along the way. Am I mistaken that a rider can just kind of do what they're told and have the numbers to do it? That all of a sudden that changes that learning curve?
Um, yes and no. I mean, there's still a learning curve.
Yeah.
Um, Look at, I don't know, I think Jay Vine is a good example.
Yeah.
He got a contract off of his Zwift performance, and he's an incredible talent. He just didn't have experience racing in a peloton on a road and in races of that level. Um, and it took him a while to get the hang of it. And he's probably still learning, but he was so strong that he could sort of make up for his mistakes early on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but once he started to race more efficiently in the peloton and make better tactical decisions, um, he's proven to be one of the best riders in the world. But they knew that he could be because of his data.
This, I don't want to make this too depressing of a question, but and I probably shouldn't phrase it with what's wrong, but what's wrong in the United States in your opinion? Why aren't we seeing a opportunity for a full U.S. based team? Why aren't we seeing the Tour of California's the I think as far back as some of the even the regional races that used to happen, Colorado, things like that. What's changed here in the United States, in your opinion?
I probably don't have enough information to give a valid opinion on that. Um,
It just seems
I,
our
I don't.
numbers, yeah, okay. I always refer to the fact that I go back to the fact that I remember the days when USA Cycling required teams to put on races, just something as simple as that, where if you had a club, you had to put on some sort of an event. There were more opportunities to race. I don't know what it's like where you are. I'm on the West Coast, and it's hard to find bike races anymore. And that is a developmental thing for juniors.
It has to make. I mean, it has to make financial sense too to
Yeah.
promote a race. I mean, my wife and I have promoted a charity event. We did it in 2019, and then we brought it back again this year in June. And even the way that the costs for a small event like ours increased just in that short period of time in between our events, it's crazy. So it's hard from that point of view to begin with.
Yeah. So tell
So
me,
much more expensive than it was probably 5 years ago to put an event on.
yeah. Oh no, I'm in the same boat. I put on an event myself, and yeah, exactly. People are complaining about increased entry fees. It's not that you're sitting back and I'm not Scrooge McDuck lying in a pile of money after these events are over with. I'm lucky to hopefully break even and keep things going mentally to be able to do it again next year.
Mhm.
So what does life after cycling consist of? Before I hit record, you and I were talking about the fact that there are some things you miss, there are some things you don't miss. You're still involved in the sport. To sit back at 34 and consider yourself retired from a career seems to be a weird thing to think about. But what does life consist like now for Ben King?
Um, that is still taking shape.
Okay.
Um, it's been very busy. Um, I like to mention, I guess, like I don't really know how to bring this up, but my wife and I lost our daughter in October.
Oh man.
She was born in July, the beginning of July, with an extremely rare genetic disorder. Um, Her impending birth was one of the factors I took into consideration
Yeah.
when making the decision to end my cycling career. I decided to, I made that decision in May, raced the national championships at the end of June, and was home for Olivia's birth in July. Um, we then spent 2.5 months in the NICU,
Oh
um,
gosh.
fighting for a diagnosis, fighting for an explanation for um, the trouble she was having. Um, we finally received a diagnosis through rapid broad genetic testing and were able to take her home. It was unfortunately not a good diagnosis, but um, having an answer, having an explanation, um, and it opened the door to more resources. It gave us more confidence um, in the difficult treatment decisions we were having to make. Um, Enough confidence to bring her home and manage her care um, until our eventual passing at the end of October. Um, After her death, we founded a 501(c)(3) called Olivia's Light, um, with the mission of funding that rapid broad genetic testing for families who um, are desperate for answers, who are both in a NICU and outpatients. Because what we learned through our experience, and the reason that we decided we chose this um, cause to serve, is that we realized how many patients are being sent home from the hospital with a band-aid for their extreme symptoms like epilepsy and apnea and um, trouble feeding. They're getting sent home with feeding tubes and um, CPAPs and
Yeah.
um, medication for seizures, um, but they don't actually know what's causing those symptoms. Um, and we want to play a role in changing that, because the technology does exist and has existed for 10 years for all of those families to get answers. For one reason or another, it hasn't become a sort of a first line tool that all departments in these big hospitals are using. Um, the geneticists are really busy. The wait list, I've heard of wait lists to see geneticists that are up to 2 years long. Um, so we're able to hopefully step in and fund testing for
Wow.
families who couldn't otherwise afford it, because it's still expensive. Um, so that's one
It,
of the big things that we've been focusing on. It's the reason that we promoted the cycling event in June. That was a really big job. It was really, we had a lot of support, but it was really just my wife and I who did everything for that.
what is the name of that event, and what type of an event? A Fondo style or?
Fondo style, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Ride home roads.
Okay.
Then we had an after party with an auction. It was a blast. We're still thinking about next year, if and how we want to do it. But we had a great time. It was a very successful. It was in some ways also a retirement party for me, given what we went through
Yeah.
at the end of last year. I didn't even get to acknowledge the end of my career. Nationals was my last race, and I, at the time, didn't know it. Um, but with Olivia's complications and support from my team at the time, Human Powered Health, um, I was able to be home, to be involved. The team didn't ask me to return to racing, um, which was really generous of them, because there was a lot to do, and a limited time with that we had to spend with Olivia. So um,
Well,
yeah, it was not really the way that anyone in the family had imagined, beginning a major transition.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it was a pretty tough year.
And to
And it also kind of delayed my um, progress on identifying a new career, what direction I wanted that to take.
and you spend so much time focused on one very specific goal, one objective, one target, a career path, and then have it come to its conclusion, and then have something as traumatic as what you've been through has. Yeah, I can only imagine you haven't had really any time to stop and take it in, and gain a perspective about where to go from here. That's brutal.
I have made progress, and
Yeah,
I hope to have some news to share soon.
good.
But I kind of know more or less what direction I'd like to go.
Yeah.
Just waiting for everything to fall into place.
Staying in the sport?
No,
No? Okay.
unfortunately, a lot of the opportunities that would be available to me, that would leverage my experience in the sport, would require the same, if not more,
Yeah.
travel than I had to do as an athlete. And the main reason that I ended my racing career was, so that I wouldn't have to travel
Yeah.
quite so much.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would prefer to just keep racing.
Wow. Okay. So Ride Home Roads, is there a website or someplace in which, and for Olivia's Light, is there a place that people can kind of research and see what's going on with all this stuff?
Yeah, I'll share Olivia's Light website because
Okay.
we're still thinking about Ride Home Roads and when and if we want to do it again.
Sure.
Uh, Olivia's Light is oliviaslight.org.
Okay.
Pretty easy, but the .org is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for sure, so
Thank you.
people can kind of find out how to get a hold of that. Well, this is a tough transition from that. First of all, thanks for sharing that story. I had no idea, and I don't have anything other than cliches to say. I'm so sorry for what you've gone through, but I'm sorry for what you've gone through, man. Thanks for sharing that and doing something with it. To take, especially that challenge for you and your wife to have lost a child is sometimes absolutely, you can't come back from something like that. And the fact that the two of you are obviously still, you're taking your memory and you're doing something with it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It felt like kind of the least we could do to create a legacy for Olivia, to honor her memory. It felt like a responsibility that had been placed on us,
Yeah.
as her parents. So yeah, but I mean, a lot of the credit goes to my wife. She's been incredible, and um, she actually started a full-time job 5 months ago. So I've been full-time daddy daycare and managing a lot of the operations for the event that we promoted, and now managing renovations at the home, and we've kept ourselves extremely busy. I've continued to interview and network, and have made a lot of progress recently. So like I said, I hope there's news to share soon on that front. Um,
Awesome.
yeah.
So this is something I like to do in my interviews, that we just kind of, to end the show with a little bit of fluff and a little bit of fun. I call this the rapid fire questions, and these are just 10 short questions that you can choose to answer, or you can pass if you want, if that's okay.
All right.
All right. Number 1, super simple. Favorite bike you've ever owned?
Supposed to be rapid, I know. Um, I've liked a lot of the bikes that I rode.
Yeah.
I really liked the Trek Madone. I think it was the
Okay.
6.8 maybe, before they put the brakes underneath.
Okay. Yeah.
I like the classic geometry. Like if it's not broken, don't fix it. I loved the Cannondale CAD 9. I liked everything before disc brakes. Um, I'm allowed to say that now because no one's paying me, but I still think disc brakes in general are slower. Some brands have figured it out. Others have some work to do.
Yeah.
The disc brakes brake better, but the bikes themselves don't go faster yet. So,
Well, that actually takes one of my farther questions away. So that's a good one to know, because I was going to ask you about your opinions, disc or rim. But yeah, okay. No, that's good.
Glad you didn't.
We're old
I mean, I
school.
love now that I don't have to go fast. I love disc brakes. I love them on my mountain bike.
Yeah, there's a situation for disc brakes that work incredibly well. I agree on a mountain bike 100%. My wife and I ride tandems, and if a disc brake on a tandem saves the entire game, you're not blowing a tire because you're cooking your rims.
Yeah.
Favorite pre and post ride beverage? What would you start off with? What do you finish with?
Coffee.
How do you like your coffee?
I like a double espresso.
Okay.
Started putting a little bit of cream in. Don't know if that makes me a wimp, but
Now you're good. And post ride.
and post ride, especially this time of year, would have to be a slushy.
Okay. A specific flavor?
No, not necessarily. I'm trying to think of it. I mean, the gas station where I end a lot of my rides has a flavor called Tiger's Blood.
I think I know what that is. Doesn't it have Red Bull in it or something like that?
No, no,
No?
I don't think so. No, it's all like naturally flavored.
Oh, okay. Okay. Um, Best team kit you have ever seen. Best fashion style team kit you've ever seen.
Oh gosh, that is a tough one. I like simple.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that. I like
Okay.
simple.
Okay. Leave it clean. Old kind of classic look to it, right? So you're not
Yeah.
necessarily okay.
You're not a billboard.
Yeah. Other than Eddie Merckx, best rider ever.
That's tough. Best all round rider, best GC rider, best sprinter,
Your call. You can just
best
pick one.
climber.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to pass on that one.
Okay. Okay. No, that's fair. There.
No question.
Well, this is kind of unfair too. It's the next one because it's almost like having to pick a rider. Current band or musician that you love.
I feel like all I've been listening to lately is Coco Melon
Okay.
and my 2-year-old's favorite songs. We've been
Perfect.
listening to a song called "We're Going on a Bear Hunt." It's been on repeat
Yeah.
for the past 4 days. If I get to listen to music, I like to find new stuff, and I like my taste has gotten heavier and heavier. Um, I like August Burns Red, Animals as Leaders, um, that genre.
Okay. Okay. Bike packing, yes or no?
I don't need another hobby. I have way too many hobbies.
So it's
So
a no.
for me, no, I'm just not going to get into it.
Okay. Okay.
Not that I wouldn't enjoy it, just like I don't need another hobby. I
Yeah,
have too
yeah.
many.
Most recent movie you loved. Now that's probably hard with a 2-year-old in the house.
Yeah, that is tough. We've we watch more series, I feel like now.
Okay.
But
Is there
seen a
one?
lot of
Is there a particular one that you really got into? A series?
series.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just watched the final season of Jack Ryan.
Did I haven't started that yet? And how did it finish off? Was it worth it?
I mean, worth it for sure. You got to
Okay.
finish what you start.
Okay. Good point. Good point. See, because I thought season
No,
two
it's
got.
good.
I thot season
It's
two the
entertaining.
end
It's
got a
just
little cheesy.
pure entertainment.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Apple or Samsung?
Apple.
Okay. It's almost second to last question. Special occasion meal, if you, for your birthday or upon after the stage victory or a race victory. What is your special occasion go to meal?
Um, I mean, one of my favorite things to make at home is venison steaks
Oh wow. Okay. Okay.
or
Nice.
burgers
Yeah.
or bolognese or meatballs or anything. I don't know. I am a hunter, so we eat a lot of wild game.
Oh wow. Okay. I haven't had it's venison steak. I've had venison in hamburger in a burger or in I have a relative who makes venison sausage that's actually very good.
Hmm,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. Okay, last one, and you can go with this. I don't know if you're up to speed on it, but final question: who will win the 2023 Vuelta? If you had to pick.
It's going to be really interesting
Yeah.
because the two favorites probably have already won a Grand Tour this year. But then you've got like Remco, who's fresh
Yeah.
and has been targeting this. So I don't know. I'm gonna just kick back and enjoy it. We'll let it unfold. I think it's always interesting. It'll be interesting to see the tactics in the first week or two. The way they raced the tour, I thought was super interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, by they, I mean UAE and Jumbo-Visma.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Now, correct me. Primoz and Jonas are both going to be there too. So it's almost like bringing back getting the band back together from last year's Tour de France.
right. Which is what I meant. I mean,
Yeah.
they've won both of the Grand Tours already this year, and then
Yeah.
I saw something about how um, they would potentially be the first team ever to win all three Grand Tours in a season. Is that correct?
Yeah. With my limited statistical knowledge, I would say that would absolutely be the case. I mean, the only thing I could think of is going way back to like the Renault Jeton days where they might have done it, where actually probably one rider did all three. It was Bernard Hinault days, but that would be it. So, yeah. Right on. Well, once again, oliviaslight.org is where we want people to go take a look and find things out. Is there any other way people can kind of follow along with your adventures, or do you kind of like to keep those cards close to the chest?
Yeah, for sure. On Instagram, I'm BKING137. I haven't been super active there lately, but will post when I have something to share. While I've also been spending a lot of time and energy on wildlife photography, and I have a page, BK Nature Photo.
Okay.
And my website for that is bknaturephoto.com.
Awesome. Well, cool, man. Well, first of all, thanks for your time. Second of all, thanks for your great career. It's awesome to have followed you along your adventures, and us don't think that we took it for granted. Watching these races and watching what you guys did, and as you said, the unfortunate responsibility that you guys had placed upon your shoulders. Not only did you want to be great bike racers, but you had to change a cultural shift of where our sport had been in a dark time. And to come back from that was obviously a responsibility you guys didn't ask for, but you were thrust into. So thanks for doing that for the sport we love.
Yeah, the sport we love. It's a privilege and an honor. Grateful for having been in that position.
Yeah. And good luck on your next steps, man. Good luck in your next adventure. I do want to say on a personal note, I was a stay-at-home dad for the first 5 years of my son's life, and they are the best 5 years I ever had. So, if anybody...
Well, I don't take any of the time that I've had to spend with him for granted. I know it won't last forever, but, it's been really sweet.
Yeah. Awesome. Good to hear, man. Thanks again.
For sure. Thanks, Patrick. Pat.
Great talk, great career, great guy, and a pretty amazing perspective on things, if I don't mind saying so. Once again, should you want to look out for Ben, be sure to check out his Instagram as well as oliviaslight.org. Guess that's it for another episode of the Packfiller Interviews. We'll see you out there on the roads. Be sure and like, subscribe, and be sure and tune in to our regular podcast Tuesdays live right here in the Rim Break Bar at Packfiller Studios. Or just head over to packfiller.com. We'll catch you next time.